3 weeks after my husband died, a stranger knocked on my door. I had never seen this man before. He was about 35, tall, dark hair, leather jacket. He looked past me, into my apartment, into my home, like he was evaluating it, like he was calculating what it was worth. He smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was cold, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. He said, "Are you Rosa?" I said, "Yes. Who are you?" He said, "I am Marco, Javier's son." Before I tell you what happened, if you're new here, subscribe. Turn on notifications. I don't want to lose you. These stories travel far. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I like knowing who's sitting with me. I stared at him. I said, "Javier's son? There must be a mistake. My husband didn't have another son." He laughed. Not a happy laugh, a bitter, hollow laugh. He said, "Of course he didn't tell you. He never told anyone about me." Then he looked past me again, at my furniture, at my photos on the wall, at everything I had built with my husband over 24 years, and he said, "We need to talk about this place, because my father promised it to me, and now that he's gone, I'm here to claim what's mine." I stood there, in my doorway, in my home of 8 years, 3 weeks after losing everything, and a man I had never met was telling me it was his. Let me tell you what happened next. Javier died on January 7th, 2020. Heart attack, sudden. He was 46 years old. One day he was laughing at breakfast. The next day, he was gone. After 24 years of marriage, I thought I knew everything about him. I was wrong. I did not know my husband had a son from before we met, a son he never mentioned, a son no one in his family ever told me about. In 24 years, not one person said the name Marco. Maybe Javier was ashamed. Maybe he thought it didn't matter. Maybe he was going to tell me someday and never found the right moment. I'll never know, and that is something I have to live with. For 3 weeks after Javier died, I existed. I went through the funeral. I went through his things with my daughter Sophia. I stared at his side of the bed. His pillow still held the shape of his head. I couldn't bring myself to move it. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I barely left the apartment. I didn't know that Marco was watching, waiting. I didn't know he would come back with a lawyer. I didn't know he would demand $15,000 I didn't have. I didn't know my life was about to become a war. Then, one evening, there was a knock on my door. I opened the door, and there he was again. Same cold smile, same calculating eyes. He said, "Can I come in? We need to talk." I should have said no. I should have closed the door. But I was 44 years old. I had just lost my husband, and I didn't know how to say no to a man who said he was Javier's son. So I let him in. He walked into my living room like he owned it. He looked at my couch. He looked at my television. He looked at the photos of me and Javier on our wedding day, on our anniversary, with our children. Then he sat down on my couch without asking. That smile again, the one that made my skin cold. I sat across from him. My hands were shaking. I clasped them together so he wouldn't see. I said, "If you're really Javier's son, why did I never hear about you?" He leaned back, comfortable, like this was his home and I was the guest. He said, "Because my father was ashamed of me. I was born before he married you. My mother was someone he dated when he was young. He left her. He left me. He built a new life with you and pretended I didn't exist." I felt something cold in my chest, a mix of shock and guilt and confusion. I said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." He waved his hand, dismissive. He said, "I know you didn't, but now you do, and that's why I'm here." I said, "Why are you here?" He leaned forward. The smile disappeared. He said, "My father owned this apartment, right?" I said, "We rented it together for 8 years." He said, "But the lease, whose name is on the lease?" I said, "Both of our names." He nodded, like he expected that, like he had planned for it. He said, "Well, now that he's gone, I think we need to discuss what happens to his half." I stared at him. I said, "His half? This is my home. I live here." He said, "I understand that, but legally I am his son. I am his blood, and I have rights." Rights. He said it like it was obvious, like it was simple, like I should just accept it. I said, "What do you want?" He said, "I want what's fair. I want my father's share of this place. Or we can work something out." I said, "Work something out how?" That smile came back, cold, calculating. He said, "I'm a reasonable man, Rosa. I don't want to make this difficult for you, but I need to be compensated for what my father left behind. We can talk about the amount, but first I need to see the lease. I need to see the will. I need to see what my father left." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. He stood up. He said, "Think about it. I'll come back in a few days." Then he walked to my door, opened it himself, and left. After he was gone, I sat on the couch for a long time. The couch he had sat on, without asking. I didn't understand what had just happened. Javier had a son I never knew about, a son who was now claiming rights to my home. My home. I called Sophia. I told her everything. My voice was shaking. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mama, do not sign anything. Do not give him anything. Not until you talk to a lawyer." I said, "A lawyer? Mija, I don't have money for a lawyer." She said, "Mama, this is your home. You need to protect yourself. Please, just talk to someone. And don't let him in again." I said I would, but I didn't call a lawyer right away. I did something else instead. I went to the library. I know that sounds strange. A grieving widow, 3 weeks after losing her husband, going to the library instead of calling a lawyer. But let me tell you something about myself. When I came to this country, I didn't speak English. When I studied for my citizenship test in 2005, I spent months at libraries. I learned how to research. I learned how to read documents I didn't understand. I learned how to find information. That skill saved my life, and it was about to save my home. I sat at a computer in the corner of the Houston Public Library. My hands were still shaking. I didn't even know what to search. I typed, "Texas property inheritance, husband dies." For an hour, I read things I didn't understand. Legal terms, probate, intestate succession, community property. I almost gave up. The words blurred together. My head hurt. I thought, maybe Marco is right. Maybe I don't have rights. Maybe the law is on his side. Then I found something. Community property. In Texas, when you're married, everything you acquire during the marriage belongs to both spouses equally. When one spouse dies, the surviving spouse keeps their half. I read it again. The surviving spouse keeps their half. My heart started beating a little faster. Then I searched something else. Rental apartment inheritance, Texas. And I found the answer. Marco had no claim to my apartment. None. The lease was a rental agreement, not property ownership. When Javier died, I became the sole tenant. The landlord couldn't evict me. And Marco, even if he was Javier's son, had no legal right to demand money for a rental property. He couldn't claim what we didn't own. I sat back in my chair. I read it again and again. He had lied to me. Or maybe he didn't know the law either. Maybe he just assumed that because he was blood, he was owed something. But the law didn't care about blood. The law cared about documents, about leases, about what was actually owned. And we didn't own this apartment. We rented it. I printed everything I found. I put it in a folder. My hands weren't shaking anymore. And I waited for Marco to come back. Marco came back 4 days later, but this time he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, professional, business suit, carrying a black leather briefcase. She didn't smile at all. Marco said, "Rosa, this is my lawyer. We're here to discuss the terms." Terms. I let them in. I wanted to see what they had, what they thought they could take from me. They sat on my couch. The lawyer placed her briefcase on my coffee table. She clicked it open. The sound was sharp in the quiet apartment. Inside were papers, official-looking papers, letterheads, signatures, lines for me to sign. Marco said, "Rosa, we've prepared a simple agreement. You sign this and we can settle everything without going to court." I said, "What does it say?" The lawyer said, "It states that you acknowledge Marco's claim as Javier's heir and agree to compensate him for his share of the estate." I said, "How much?" Marco smiled, that cold smile. He said, $15,000. $15,000. I looked at him. I looked at the papers. I looked at the lawyer watching me like I was a problem to be solved. I said, "I don't have $15,000. He said, "Then we can arrange a payment plan, $1,000 a month for 15 months. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. I said, "And if I don't sign?" Marco's smile disappeared. He said, "Then we go to court. And trust me, Rosa, you don't want that. You're just the second wife and an immigrant. I am his blood. I am his son. Any judge will see that I have rights here." The lawyer nodded. "Mrs. Santos, this is a very fair offer. I suggest you consider it carefully." I looked at both of them. Then I looked at the papers. I didn't touch them. I thought about the folder in my closet, the folder with everything I had printed at the library. I said, "I need time to think." Marco said, "You have 3 days." Then they left. When the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. 3 days. I didn't need 3 days. I needed a phone. The next morning, I called a lawyer. His name was Mr. James Patterson. He specialized in estate and probate law. Sophia found him online and helped me make the appointment. I brought everything: Marco's papers, my research from the library, the lease, every document I could find. Mr. Patterson read everything carefully. He took his time. He made notes. Then he looked at me. He said, "Mrs. Santos, this agreement is nonsense." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Marco has no legal claim to this apartment. You and your husband rented it. The lease is in both your names. When your husband died, you became the sole tenant. The landlord cannot evict you, and Marco cannot demand money from you for a rental property that neither you nor your husband owned." I felt something lift off my chest, like I had been carrying a weight I didn't know was there. I said, "But what about inheritance? What about his rights as Javier's son?" He said, "If your husband had assets, a house, a car, savings, then yes, Marco might have a claim to part of that, but only to actual assets, not to a lease. Did your husband leave a will?" I said, "No." He said, "Did he have any assets, property, savings?" I thought about it. I said, "He had an old truck and a small savings account, maybe $2,000. Mr. Patterson nodded. He said, "Then that's all Marco could potentially claim. Half of the truck value and half of the savings. That's it. His legal share would be about $1,500 total, not $15,000. $1,500, not $15,000. He said, "And even if he did have a claim to those assets, he would have to go through probate court. He cannot just show up at your door with papers and demand money. That's not how the law works." I said, "So I don't have to sign this paper?" He said, "Absolutely not. In fact, I strongly advise you not to. This is a predatory agreement designed to take advantage of your grief and your lack of legal knowledge." He leaned forward. He said, "Mrs. Santos, I will send Marco's lawyer a letter. I will explain that you are represented by counsel and that his demands have no legal basis. If he continues to harass you, we can file a restraining order." I said, "How much will this cost?" He said, "For a letter? $300. If it goes further, we'll discuss fees. But I don't think it will go further. Once he realizes you have a lawyer and you know your rights, he will back off. People like Marco count on you not knowing the law." I thought about it. $300. I had that. Barely. I said, "Send the letter." 2 days later, Marco came back. He knocked on my door, loud, aggressive. Not the knock of someone asking permission, the knock of someone who thinks they own the place. I took a breath, I stood up straight, and I opened the door. He was alone this time. No lawyer, no briefcase, just him. And he looked angry. He said, "You hired a lawyer?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Why would you do that? I was trying to help you. I was trying to make this easy." I looked at him, at that face that looked so much like my husband's, at those eyes that were nothing like Javier's. I said, "You were trying to take advantage of me." He laughed, a bitter, angry laugh. He said, "Take advantage of you? You have no idea what you're talking about. My father owed me. He abandoned me. He left me with nothing. And you got everything. The family, the life, the respect. What did I get? Nothing." I looked at him. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt sad for him, and I felt angry at what he had tried to do. I said, "I'm sorry your father wasn't there for you. I'm sorry you didn't have a relationship with him. But that is not my fault, and you don't get to punish me for it." He stepped closer. His face was red. He said, "You're just the second wife and an immigrant. I am his blood. This place, everything he had, it should have been mine." I didn't move. I said, "This is not your place. It's my place. My name is on the lease. I pay the rent. I have lived here for 8 years. You have no legal right to be here." I paused. I said, "And if you come back again, I will call the police." His eyes went wide. The anger shifted to something else. Surprise, confusion. He wasn't used to hearing no. He said, "You think you're so smart? You think a lawyer is going to save you? You're nothing. You're—" I closed the door. I locked it. I stood there, my hand on the door, my heart pounding. But my hand was steady. I could hear him outside, breathing, muttering something I couldn't understand. Then I heard footsteps, walking away. He was gone. I stood there for a long time after he left. My legs were shaking now, the fear I hadn't let myself feel during the confrontation finally catching up. But I had done it. I had stood in my doorway, in my home, and I had closed the door on a man who thought he could take everything from me. And I had won. I didn't hear from Marco again. Mr. Patterson's letter worked. Once Marco's lawyer received it, they stopped contacting me. The calls stopped, the visits stopped. The silence was strange at first. I kept expecting another knock, but it never came. A few weeks later, Mr. Patterson called me. He said, "Mrs. Santos, Marco filed a claim in probate court for half of your husband's estate." My stomach dropped. I said, "Can he do that?" He said, "Legally, yes. If he can prove he's Javier's son, which it appears he can, he's entitled to a share of the estate under Texas law. But Mrs. Santos, listen to me. The estate is small. The truck is worth maybe $1,000. The savings account has $2,000. His legal share would be about $1,500 total." $1,500, not $15,000. He said, "He has no claim to your apartment, no claim to your home, just his legal share of what your husband actually owned. And honestly, I think he'll take the settlement and disappear." I thought about it. I said, "Let him have it." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes. I don't want to fight over an old truck and $1,500. If that's what he's legally owed, he can have it. I just want him to leave me alone. I want this to be over." He said, "Understood. I'll handle it." 3 months later, the probate case was closed. Marco received his share, $1,500 and half ownership of an old truck. Not $15,000. Not my apartment. Not my home. I kept everything that mattered, and I never heard from him again. I think about that time sometimes, the weeks after Javier died. How lost I was, how vulnerable, how close I came to losing everything. Marco walked into my apartment, sat on my couch without asking, and tried to take my home. He brought a lawyer and official-looking papers. He told me I had no rights. He told me I was just the second wife. And I almost believed him. That's what scares me the most. Not Marco, not his threats. The fact that I almost believed him. But here's what I learned. I learned that knowledge is power, not money, not connections, not a loud voice or a confident walk. Knowledge. When I went to that library, when I sat at that computer with shaking hands and searched for answers I didn't know how to find, when I read about community property and rental agreements and Texas inheritance law, that saved me. If I hadn't done that research, I might have signed Marco's paper. I might have believed him when he said I had no rights. I might have given him $15,000 I didn't have. But I didn't, because I knew better, because I learned. And I learned something else. People will try to take advantage of you when you're weak, when you're grieving, when you're scared, when you don't know your rights. They will use your pain against you. They will make you feel guilty. They will make you feel small. They count on you not knowing any better. But you don't have to let them. You have rights. You have the ability to learn. You have the power to say no and close the door. Sometimes that's the strongest thing you can do. I stayed in that apartment for 4 more years. Every month I paid the rent. Every month I remembered what I almost lost. Not just the apartment, the knowledge that I could defend myself. Sophia told me she was proud of me. She said, "Mama, you could have signed that paper. You could have believed him. You could have given up. But you didn't. You went to the library. You learned. You fought back." I said, "I didn't have a choice." She said, "You always have a choice, and you made the right one." Maybe she's right, or maybe I got lucky. Lucky that I knew where to look for information. Lucky that I found a good lawyer. Lucky that the law was on my side. But I don't think it was just luck. I think it was preparation. All those years of studying English. All those hours preparing for my citizenship test. All that time learning how to learn. It all mattered. And when I needed it most, it saved me. Marco demanded $15,000. He got $1,500. The difference between those two numbers? My education. If this story touched you, leave me a comment below. Have you ever had someone try to take advantage of you when you were vulnerable? Have you ever had to learn your rights the hard way? Have you ever closed a door that needed to be closed? I want to hear your story. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. Click the bell. I'll be here. I'm always here. This is Tia Rosa from Houston, Texas, reminding you some doors need to be closed, and you're the only one who can close them. Sending you love.